just some of also the reaction from global leaders.
Yeah, so just to reflect on what President Ramaphosa actually touched upon, I think the other elements that stood out for me was that he emphasized that the G20 has to act boldly. It has to intervene. Post South Africa's presidency ends on the last day of November. He also said the Johannesburg Declaration is more than words. It's about shared concerns of the world population, not South Africa, not Africa, not the global South, not even the global North. He says for everybody. And then, I go back to this word that he used. He used the word just. Towards the end, he used the word justice, he used the word just. And he says, we've got a common humanity. That is the common thread. And we need to ensure, that is why it's being held here in South Africa, on the African continent, that no one, absolutely no one, whether you're from Africa, Asia, North America, Oceania, or even one of the smaller island nations, we're not forgetting you. We see you, we validate you. No one is going to be left behind. But obviously we're going to see what happens next year when the presidency, but South Africa is going to be involved in the Troika, past, present, future, the UK, South Africa, US and the UK. So I think that's where the real test is going to come, the dynamics, the machinations of how the US is going to address some of the critical issues that were brought up by some of the more prominent leaders of the G20 at this two-day summit here.
Absolutely.
And I think for me, I won't share my views, right? I'll just share some of the conversations that, you would see. For example, you think about the Turkey president, right? The first point where he starts is exactly where everybody starts when they meet you. Thank you so much for your warm hospitality, which comes with a smile from the people of South Africa. That is exactly what we are known for, Ubuntu. And that is why you even see Ubuntu reflected on the declarations. And I suppose it speaks to just who we are as a people and how the international media, this morning, getting coffee, one international journalist says, oh my goodness, the spread of food. Is this how people of South Africa are? They feed people. I said, you haven't seen anything yet. You're about to have meat like you've never had before. And he looked at me and said, you guys have a lot of meat, So you really just think about some of the things that we take for granted on a daily basis, that the world is watching, and they speak about how, sometimes when we go for conferences, we don't have the warm smiles, we don't eat this much. But here we've seen even people who would ordinarily be a little hostile during press conferences or even big events, the police, they've had smiles on their faces, ready to help. And I think it gives us a sense, like Sophie is saying, the world has always descended on South Africa. And we know how to always, bring out that smile. That is why when we travel, the first thing you miss is no place like home, because the warmth of home is exactly how we've been with the world this week.
Absolutely. And I would have to agree with all of you, particularly because a lot of people that we've been speaking to have been saying that this G20 presidency has been African-led, both in tonality and both in substance. When you saw, the world leaders landing, they were greeted by various groups of South Africa, from dancing to singing to just displaying those smiles that you speak about. So it has really been fantastic. And we will be speaking to the group CEO of the SABC just shortly, as the host broadcaster, in terms of what it all entails. And we'll also be speaking to other journalists that are on the floor, Bonge.
And the conversation continues, right? I'm spotting the group CEO, so we'll go for a quick break. But just before we do that, Unati, it shouldn't be lost on us that, for example, the president speaks about how the review he's hoping is going to be a guide for the world. And this is something Sophie touched on. This is something that the Sue Sherpa touched on. Something that the Sherpa touched on, because it's going to be important. This review is so critical because you cannot chart a way forward with a divided world. You absolutely cannot. And as you chart a way forward, the world has got to be united. So certainly as we wrap up this conversation with, Sophie as well as Ranesh, it's important for us to perhaps even think about inclusivity and what it means going forward.
Absolutely. All right, let's take that quick break. We'll be back with more news for you. Stay tuned.
SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.